The Doge influence will only go stronger. I'd liken it to sort of Buddhism. It's like a way of life. So it is permeating throughout the government, and I'm confident that over time we will see $1 trillion of savings and a reduction in $1 trillion of waste and fraud reduction.
Elon Musk there with a positive message as he steps down from his role with the Trump administration. Some believe his impact in Washington is likely to live on. Others are skeptical about his cost-cutting legacy. Our next guest is the author of this quote: "Did Elon Musk drain the swamp or drown in it?" Let's bring in Stephen Moore, former economic advisor to President Trump and a visiting fellow for the Heritage Foundation. So, Stephen, answer the question posed by your own headline. Did he drown or did he drain it?
Well, John, I don't think we know the answer to that yet, because I think we're going to see over the course of the next few months and even the next few years whether DOGE lives on and really captures those hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of savings. I think Elon Musk says he thinks there's $1 trillion over 10 years. I think that's quite possible. But you know, there's another old saying about Washington that no good deed goes unpunished. And Elon Musk came in about 4 months ago. He did it at his own expense, put his business interests on hold. I think he's a real patriot. I think he's a hero for what he did. But boy, you know, Washington just tried to devour him. He became an instant villain for informing and educating Americans about how much waste and fraud and thievery there is out of the federal government. I don't really understand that reaction, but he certainly got beaten up in Washington.
Yeah, that was the amazing thing to me. Here is a guy who was sort of beloved by, you know, the green culture and
right.
Many on the left for inventing this car that, you know, runs on electricity and supposedly is going to save the planet. But then when he joins the Trump administration to try to save taxpayer money and cut waste, people went ballistic, mostly on the left.
Oh, boy, did they ever. And, you know, look, I'm a small government guy. I'm pretty libertarian in my philosophy. But even if you believe in big government and government is here to help you, you would think that, you know, more of the liberals would have said this is a good thing. If you believe in big government, you want good government. Unfortunately, we don't have good government in Washington. We have people stealing. We have, by the way, you don't have to just believe Elon Musk and what DOGE uncovered. The federal government's own auditors, John, have found $500 billion a year in what they call, quote, improper payments, which means people are stealing money from these programs. I would think that people would rally behind him, but it didn't happen. It's almost like he picked up a rock in Washington and showed American people all the little bugs that are underneath it, and they didn't. The people inside the Washington Beltway didn't like that much because, frankly, people are getting rich off of the scams in Washington.
Yeah, and none other than 60 Minutes had a recent piece about how foreign state actors like Russia and China are stealing money from U.S. taxpayers by, you know, creating fake IDs and that kind of thing. We ought to be able to stop that.
You're exactly right. No, you're exactly right, and that's what these. Well, for example, all the programs we had to deal with COVID, we found that as many as a quarter to a half of the people were stealing money from these programs, as you just said, John, don't even live in the United States. So that's hardly a way to stimulate the American economy if you're sending your money to Russians and Ukrainians and Chinese and other people are ripping us off. Look, I really sincerely hope that this effort continues. We're losing $2 trillion a year, John, at the federal level in terms of these massive debts and deficits. What better way to bring that debt and deficit down by taking money away from people who stole it? We should go after some of these people who stole the money and actually bring criminal charges against them. I don't think any criminal charges have been brought virtually to any of the people who've ripped off, you know, in many cases, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for these programs. So let's hope DOGE becomes a permanent entity in Washington, and let's hope it becomes bipartisan. Everybody should be against waste and fraud.
Yeah, but it does seem that from the other side of the aisle, opposite the president's side, there's been an awful lot of complaining about DOGE and what they are finding.
And that's because a lot of them are making money off of this. Remember, one of the first things that Elon Musk uncovered was these non-governmental organizations, so-called NGOs.
Right.
And I've always said, if I die, I want to be resurrected as an NGO, because hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are going to these so-called NGOs. Many of them are run by the very people who ran the federal program. So it's this incestuous relationship. And then, for example, with the USAID, the biggest foreign aid program, literally hundreds of millions of dollars. They couldn't even tell us what happened to the money.
Yeah. Incredible. Some of the stuff that they have found is truly amazing. All right, Steve Moore.
Well, John, you know what I want to do? When I'm 130 years old, I want to continue to get a Social Security check.
Yeah, because there are apparently tens of thousands of Americans who are.
Yes.
All right. Steve Moore, good to talk to you. Thanks.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.